Hello, everyone. It's Jon Zagrodzky, the First Selectman for the town of Darien. Today is Tuesday, September 11th, 2025. The purpose of this video, we have proposals for appropriation that we would like to present for everyone's consideration. Both of these projects were originated by and have the approval of the Parks and Rec Commission, which is why today I'm joined by Bora, sitting here to my left. She's the chair of the Parks and Rec Commission. And we also have Fava. Jen is the director of Parks and Recreation. And joining us by video is Dan Biggs, who is an engineer and project manager with Weston and Sampson. He has been a part of both projects for a long time and will help us sort through some technical issues in this presentation. So again, this is meant to provide you with an overview of all the key issues with both projects in the hopes that it answers most questions that you might have. So why don't I go ahead and share my screen here and we will get started. So, all right, so what we have here, as I said, the four folks who are joining this discussion. And let's start off with the two topics that we're going to cover. The Weed Beach project, which includes a beach extension, a lawn and pathway area, wetlands relocation, and parking improvements. Pear Tree Point, which is mostly about flood mitigation in the parking area, but also includes reconstruction of the boat ramp and some boat harbor dredging. And then we'll finish with the appropriation requests in some detail. If you look back in time on just the Weed Beach story, so we acquired the Short Lane property, which is sort of in between Weed Beach and Nearwater Avenue back in September 2014. We acquired it for $1,750,000, and it was actually a residence before. If you look at the picture here on the left, it's a map of that property from September 2014, and you can see what looks like a little roadway. That's Short Lane and was the driveway to that house. But we basically had no investment in this property in the more than 10 years that we've owned it. A serious effort to develop the property started back in 2015, but for various reasons, the town has not moved forward with those projects. So we did develop a plan that was led by Parks and Rec. When they did that, we had an initial placeholder budget of about $1 million. And so when the project came back in the spring of 2024 as having a $2 million price tag, the Board of Selectmen asked the Parks and Rec Commission to go back, take a look at the project and see if we could do it for less money. They looked at several options to do so and concluded that we really couldn't get the property to be what we would want as a community unless we did everything that was originally planned. So they put it out for bid again. That time in the spring, we did not get any bids because of the way the schedule for the project was configured. That we then put it out for another bid after adjusting timelines and breaking up the project a bit, and we got 5 bids this time, and we now have a winning bid to do this work. So what are some of the improvements and features that we're trying to do? As I mentioned before, we are trying to expand the beach area and basically extend the beach over from the existing part of Weed Beach. But it's also going to be an effort to improve coastal resiliency and also reduce the potential for flooding by extending the dunes that we have on Weed Beach across this property as well. We're going to create a fair bit of extensive new beach for everyone to enjoy. As Lori has said on numerous occasions, we have a lot of multifamily housing coming into town, and a lot of those folks don't have yards or outdoor spaces to enjoy. And so extending Weed Beach, which is regularly rated as the top Parks and Rec destination in town, is something that both the Commission as well as the Board of Selectmen are in unanimous agreement that is something that we need to do. You can read through the rest of the list here, but there's lots of things that we will do that are important peripherals. So things like removing invasives, burying power lines, making sure that we have adequate and resurfaced parking, and generally improving the attractiveness of this entire area. In terms of the specific project, you'll see here in this drawing, we've got a parking area on the left there that's an existing parking area today. It's not in really good shape and it has degraded somewhat. You can still park there, but it's certainly not attractive. So what we'll be doing is cleaning up that area, re-graveling that parking lot and adding a stone swale. In addition, if you look in the next there on the left, we're going to move some wetlands that are a few of them down by the beach, filled with invasives at the moment. We would take out those wetlands and consolidate them into one area that's up north near the sewer pump station that you see at the top of this map. In addition to clearing invasives and installing that berm, as I said before, all of that's going to extend from kind of left to right and create a beach footprint that exactly matches what we have in the rest of Wheat Beach today. We're also installing landscaping and screening consistent with the desires of the residents who live along Nearwater, and we've been in active consultation with them. And then we're also going to create a lawn area in between the wetlands, a little bit of what exists today in terms of a lawn that you can see, and surround that with a pathway that is going to be compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. I'll pause here for a moment because that pathway has created some controversy. Both the commission and the Board of Selectmen, after extensive discussion, have accepted putting this pathway in. And it's pretty important because for both of our beaches today, we do not have any ADA compliant pathways. So if you're mobility challenged in any way, you don't have a pathway that you could go walk on that you could enjoy near either of our beaches. And in discussions with experts in ADA compliance, we have come to the conclusion that adding a pathway like this is both important and the right thing to do for our residents who are mobility challenged, but also helps us in terms of our ADA compliance profile. So should we ever get into a dispute, having a pathway like this adds to our story, if you will, in terms of why the town is in fact compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. And then finally, at the very bottom there, you'll see that pathway. It's actually going to be a little wider than shown because we need something to accommodate trailers for folks who have kayaks and need to transport them all the way over to the right side where kayaks will continue to be based. So in terms of frequently asked questions, I kind of want to turn this over to some of my colleagues here. The first one to talk a little bit about is flooding. Some folks have had concerns that maybe this redevelopment would make flooding worse. Dan, is assuming that's not your opinion, could you give us your expert view as to why this actually makes it more flood resistant?
Yeah, so the proposed improvements, as we were making into a lawn open space, actually allows for any waters, whether it's stormwater or wave action, to be absorbed into the park space. So as John mentioned, we're going to be extending the dunes that currently exist all in the parking areas into this space. And those allow that absorption for the wave action when there is a storm event in the bay to come up and to be handled and not flood into the lawn area, as I mentioned. Also within the space are wetlands that are going to be restored by the pump station side of the park area, and actually acts as a sponge where as rainfall occurs or any storm events occur, that actually takes in water. Some water from nearby lane comes in there, and as well as the park space to handle water and allow infiltration, which also improves water quality in the overall park space.
So if you consolidate the wetlands all into one area up in the north part of the property like that, it makes it more effective. Is that right in terms of flood mitigation?
It does. It allows for greater space for water to be handled and also creates more habitat from an ecological standpoint. Currently, a lot of the wetlands, which you'll get to next question, are invasives with Phragmites predominantly, which creates a monoculture stand of wetlands. They have really a minimal ecological value within the neighborhood or the community. So having one central location is better for environmental standpoints, but also from a maintenance standpoint where staff really only have to go one spot to maintain, and there are value to the community as an ecological resource.
Okay. So next up, just on the ADA compliance, as I mentioned before, we don't have any of those on our beaches currently. Laura, you've had a lot of discussions with folks about that. Care to add your further views on the importance of this pathway?
Yes, as you said, John, over the years when we've done our Parks Master Plan and other surveys, one of the things that our community really, really values are walking paths. I know you're spearheading an effort to look at the addition of sidewalks in town, but that also emphasizes our residents' desire to get out and move and exercise via walking and being out in nature and able to do that. So we know that is something that people really do very much enjoy.
Okay.
When you combine that with the need to provide an area or the desire, an area in the beach for folks who, believe it or not, there are people who don't really like to go in the sand. They love looking at the water, but not everybody wants to be on the sand or isn't able. This will provide our residents with an area of the park where they can enjoy that magnificent view, but not necessarily have to be down in the beach if they choose not to for whatever reason.
Got it. So, Jen, we talked a little bit about just the chemicals to remove invasives. So jumping down here a little bit, you've looked into that. It's true, we're not going to use any chemicals to treat that, correct?
Correct. So that was one of the changes that we made when we rebid the document, rebid this project. So as of now, there will be no chemical treatment to remove the all the invasives. They'll actually be digging it out and then rebuilding and rebuilding the wetlands themselves.
Okay. Jumping back up, so if we put in this pathway, another thing that's been a little controversial is just the material we're going to use. So this will be an asphalt pathway like we have in different places in town. And so one question that's come up is, can't we just use a permeable surface instead of asphalt? Dan, you're the materials expert. How come that, why doesn't that work down in a beach environment? And is there really any other practical surface we could use?
Sure. Most communities tend to use a asphalt surface. One, from a maintenance standpoint, is that it is the easiest maintained and most efficient for staff to maintain as a material within the community. We often get the questions asked of why not use a permeable pavers or another product that has pores in this environment. And the really concern is that over time in a beach environment, the sand migrates and it will clog up the pores of that permeable asphalt or porous pavers. So really in this case, it looks great and it's allows for water to infiltrate for a period of time. Eventually it'll get clogged up from the sand. Otherwise, it is a significant effort to vacuum out these materials annually to get the sand out of the porous spaces to allow them to function as originally planned. So going back to a cost efficiency standpoint, asphalt, as we have in our roadways in the community, is a normal standard product that is used and is firm and stable for users of all modes to have access year-round within the park space on these pathways.
Okay. So even with the addition of not just the wider walkway and pathway for kayak trailers, but also this walkway around the park itself, or this section of the park itself, the net change in impervious surface is pretty close to zero, right? So it looks like from these figures here, we're just going from 0.45 acres to 0.49 acres in terms of total impervious surface. And that includes all the walkways, correct?
Correct. And that's during our process of evaluating the project, we calculate the existing versus proposed, and basically it's a negligible adjustment of the areas or the square footages to get that 0.04 acres of increase.
Got it. Okay. So a few other questions that have come up. One of them is just on what about new plantings, and some of the trees that we took out, that was a little controversial, but we've got 98 existing trees, total of 51 removed, and these were trees, saplings, some damaged trees, some invasives, and you're adding 36 new trees both in the property as well as along the side along near water. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we have trees within the open lawn area around the perimeter, and also we made an effort to increase at the request of Nearwater Lane residents, having some shrubs and seedlings within that buffer zone between the roadway and the park space to preserve some views, but also to provide a sound buffer for residents to protect the views into their lawn areas or properties. The seedlings also would be part of the wetland reconstruction. So as that wetland is going to not just be grasses, but also a vegetation that can grow, allows for successful ecology and environment for habitat growth within the wetland space.
Got it. Okay. So we kind of covered wetlands. Lori, if we don't do anything about this property, and we've had it for an awfully long time, would you care to comment on that and why the commission feels that really now's the time to get this done?
Sure, John. The area in question, which really includes not just the short lane parcel, which we acquired, which I think was give or take an acre, but the surrounding property. So the total project is just shy of about 5 acres, I believe, Dan. And because we've not proceeded with any development or project in the property, the current condition has deteriorated significantly over the last 10 years and will continue to do so. The invasive species, the Phragmites, have really taken over and will continue to do that. As Dan has mentioned, they are choking out other habitats. The asphalt is there, both the old driveway and the driveway that goes down to where the junior sailing program boats are stored is cracked and in very, very poor condition. There's a stone wall which is crumbling. The steps are really not safe. So we really, for lack of taking care of the property in anticipation of this project, the condition will get poorer and poorer. Many of the trees now are completely overgrown by vines, which are choking them out. That's what some of the trees that did come out were diseased. Trees need to be maintained and taken care of, or we'll lose them. So by clearing it out, we will be able to preserve some of the trees, which I think otherwise will be at risk. But at this point, the property is not in good condition and is well beyond what our terrific park staff has the capability and the manpower to correct on their own. It's just beyond the scope of what they would be able to do. It really requires professional attention at this point.
You'd concur with that, Jen?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So let's turn our attention now to the other part of this discussion, which is the Pear Tree Point project. So by way of quick review, here's an aerial shot of Pear Tree Point Beach. And so what you see here is not just the parking lot there on the left side, but kind of the two beaches, the one that directly faces Long Island Sound, as well as the one that's more curved and faces Darien Harbor. You've also got the Darien Boat Club and all the boats there and the boat slips there towards the right. So the components of this project are in order. One is a bit of wetlands restoration there, which you see pointed out on the left on that second beach I mentioned. Going around clockwise, the next is channel dredging. So we're going to be dredging the area around the boat club from the boat ramp, starting with that red curved line, all the way around to about the point that you see there. That area was last dredged in 2003, and through sediment accumulation, it is now to the point where it needs to be dredged again. By way of background, one of the things you have to do to get a dredging permit is that you have to test the sediment that's going to be dredged out. And that testing is to determine whether it is overly contaminated and needs to be treated before it's disposed of, or if it's relatively clean and can simply be dumped into Long Island Sound. So in the past, this area was, quote, green in the sense that it met those standards. Those standards have tightened since then. And all of the sediment, most of it anyway, that is in the area that's shown here is going to have to be shipped out to an area where it can be disposed of safely. So that's raised the cost of dredging this area. Not terribly so, but it is certainly more expensive than it might have been otherwise. In addition to dredging, we would reconstruct that boat ramp that's right there at the end of the parking lot, shown by the blue arrow. Right now, that boat ramp is too shallow and makes it hard to drive in and lift your boat off of that. So we will reconstruct that boat ramp. And then finally, the biggest and most important part is to help improve the overall flood resilience of that area. And we will do that through improvements to the beaches themselves, but also raising and reconstructing the parking lot to make that more flood resilient. Many of you have been out there when it has flooded on a rainy day, but sometimes you get the right moon phase, and on a perfectly clear day, you can still get flooding at this particular parking lot. In listening to Craig Flaherty, who has done a lot of the research and engineering on this, his presentations are quite compelling, showing what could happen over the long term in terms of beach erosion or eventual loss of this property if we don't take action. Fact is, a difficult thing to think about with this project is that it's the ultimate, maybe important but not urgent investment. Could something like this wait a year? For sure. Is it something that we really need to think about doing in any case? Yes. This is an important coastal asset, both for our boaters as well as those who enjoy a beach environment. And as a town, both the Parks and Rec Commission and the Board of Selectmen both unanimously agree that it's time to make this investment and ensure that we preserve this important asset for generations to come. So here are a few site statistics. I'm not going to go through all of this, but I did want to point out a couple. One of them is just in terms of parking places. So the spots that are painted on the lot right now are actually too small to meet standards for how large parking spaces should be. So there's actually going to be a small net decrease of about 10% in our existing stall count. Fortunately, on most days, the beach parking is not completely full, but as part of this improvement, we need to make sure that our parking spaces are compliant with code requirements for length and width. There is going to be a decrease in net impervious area. Reason for that is that in terms of not just how we're configuring the beaches, but also some additions of some islands, if you will, in the parking lot that will have landscaping and trees. That actually makes parking safer and more manageable, and also just increases the green space there. And then finally, you can see, as I said, by raising this parking lot, we really do have less of a chance of flooding. And when you combine that with some drainage system improvements, we should be far more resilient to flooding in that area than we are currently. Further to that, I mentioned that we would have plantings, and you can see how we would deploy those plantings here, both in islands within the parking lot itself, as well as on the side. We don't have a lot of those plantings at all right now, so it's going to significantly improve the appearance of Pear Tree Point Beach and provide sort of an extra green, if you will, that I think is going to make a big difference. What if nothing else is done? I'm going to turn this over to Dan. You've looked at this, and maybe Laura, you can comment as well. Here are some photos of what I was talking about before. So here you have a perfectly bright, clear day on October 28th, 2023, and the parking lot is flooded. And then on the right, you can see what happens after a major storm. Dan, you want to comment on any of these pictures?
Yeah, I think the sunny day flooding event may have actually occurred yesterday, if I recall, with a high tide coming in the afternoon, where it's a sunny day and you just see everything flooded. So if you look in that picture, you see there's a cone. That is a catch basin. That's one of the lowest spots in the overall parking lot. So that location is pretty low during high tide. We know the elevation of that relative to the water, and it will be known that that's where the water would rise to. So in terms of the improvements we're making, the goal is to have that elevation raised, and we're planning to have it raised so that even during this high tide experience midday, that we would be above and dry above the high tide elevation. The storms are going to occur, like you see the photo on the right. They're going to keep on coming. The goal is that as the elevation of the parking lot is raised, that the severity of this erosion and the sand migrating into the parking lot is less severe, if not at all. So providing this in a sunny day and a storm event, really making improvements to invest in the park space is so that users can enjoy this during the normal sunny day experiences, but also be protected during the high storm events that are occurring more often and more frequent in our current environment.
Lori, anything to add from a sense of the commission standpoint?
Well, I would agree with Dan that the challenge in many ways when we think about the usage of the community are on those beautiful high tide days. I mean, you think about when do we all want to be at the beach?
High tide.
It's not at low tide, it's at high tide. And events like this do preclude our residents from getting down and enjoying the waterfront when it is most appealing. Dan, could you touch on also what there'll be things going on beneath the ground which will help mitigate the flooding as well, because we've had some questions about, how can bringing in some additional sand or whatever help with that, but underneath the engineers are doing things as well that we all won't see. Could you just touch on that, please?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, that cone, that is a catch basin. So that's where water naturally would flow to in the park and then drain out into the waterway. So as that is a pretty small system right now, we have a more extensive system that allow multiple catch basins to collect that water. At the end of the underground piping system, we're going to install a valve, a backflow valve. So when the tide rises, the water would not come back up into those pipes and then bubble up into the catch basins. We want to prevent that from happening, so that we don't get that backwater that occurs most times when the water is not high tide over the shoreline. So that's the hidden infrastructure that is going into having a stormwater management system beneath this parking lot that is not as extensive as it is today. Also, the addition of increasing the shoreline, as we raise that parking lot, we're going to have additional beach area extended that allows for the water to have to go higher to get up and over into the parking lot space.
So there'll be more beach for people to enjoy, which will also have a protective effect.
Okay. Jen, comments from you?
No, I think it's just important to also remember this will also help with water quality. So I know a lot of our residents are concerned with that, but again, because of this new drainage system going in, it will help with the water quality as well.
Right, because every time you have a flood like this, if there's oil or contamination on the parking lot, that goes back into Long Island Sound.
Correct.
We will fix that with this. Good point.
Exactly.
Okay. In terms of permits and approvals, we're, I think, all caught up on this, Dan, right? And if we pursue this project according to the timeline, which we'll cover in a minute, it looks like we're covered for all the permitting we need to do, correct?
Yes, this started a number of years ago. The first permit was the certificate of permission by Connecticut Deep. That is basically a state allowing us to do all improvements below the coastal jurisdiction limit, including the dredging. That expires in October 2027. Next was the Town of Darien's plan zoning approvals, which was issued in February 2025 of this year. And then finally, a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers general permit, which also is part of the dredging component, that was issued in May and it expires in 2027. So we are all approved and permits are in hand to execute the work.
So if we get the project done based on the timeline we're about to discuss, we won't run into any permit expiration. So that's good news. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the appropriation request itself for both of these projects. So we'll start with Weed Beach. One thing that's interesting to note is that for the 5 bids we got for Weed Beach and the 2 bids that we got for Pear Tree Point Beach, it ended up that Yield Industries is the firm that got both of them. So they're going to be doing both of these projects. And Jen, you did some reference checks on those guys, correct?
Actually, I have to say Dan did the reference checks.
Dan did reference checks. Okay. Positive reviews, I take it, right?
Yeah. So for every each of the 2 projects, we interview references for the 2 apparent low bidders, multiple resources. So over 7 references for each of them. Yield Industries had rave reviews on current projects and past projects, varying scales and different experiences. So we did a thorough review of their work, which includes the land side and the dredging component. Also looked at who their team was composed of, and we actually interviewed them to ask questions to verify their bid and their understanding of the project so that we can get them in and hit the ground running. And thankfully, they are looked at for both projects. So both reviews were great. And we think that there also would be efficiency for the town of having one company working on both projects in close proximity to each other.
Great. So the appropriation that the Board of Selectmen has voted to approve $2,141,000 for Weed Beach. That's going to include the fees for Yield Industries to do this work, a 5% contingency. Your firm obviously is going to be involved in some of this, as shown here for both Weed Beach and Pear Tree Point. Can you just summarize briefly what your role is going to be in all this as these projects are completed?
Yes. So on both projects, we will have a representative on site during the duration of construction, part-time, but during critical pieces of construction, they'll be there full-time. Our team also oversees independent testing of materials and products. So as they're excavating or installing stone, we will have an inspector there and a testing agency to test to verify that what's going around is a proper compaction or the proper composition for our plans and specifications. We also be documenting and reviewing, when pay applications come in or any changes or field questions come in. Our team is there to answer that from the field and from the office side to make sure that we're addressing any questions and needs of the contractor to ensure that they're staying on schedule and getting to the end result of a finished product.
Okay, so in our bid for Weed Beach, there were two areas that we asked them to bid out separately so we could just look at those costs. Those include the asphalt walkway that we've discussed around the lawn area, as well as the separate one that's along the gravel parking lot. Again, both to facilitate mobility for the folks that require that. And you can see the costs of those two separate investments. We discussed all of that pretty extensively in the Board of Selectmen meeting on Monday, but in the end agreed with the Parks and Rec Commission that those are walkways that we want to keep for a variety of reasons, not just for ADA compliance. So next up is Pear Tree Point. So Yield Industries, again, winning that bid, just under $8 million. And we've got a rough breakdown of what that includes. So the parking, about $3.8 million to do that work, dredging about $2.5 million, and the boat ramp about $500,000. Those don't quite total to $8 million, but because there's some other costs in there, but that gives you a rough idea of the breakdown in the three major project components. A contingency of 8% for this project versus the 5% for Weed Beach. What's your sense of why the contingency is a bit higher on Pear Tree Point?
Yeah, so the reason why Pear Tree is a little higher is that it's a grander scale of a project. Also, there could be unknowns where you have a dredging component where you can't necessarily see what the conditions are today in comparison to Weed Beach, where it's a pretty straightforward grading exercise, building the pathways and the dunes and the beach. So it's pretty basic construction works there. But Pear Tree is a little more complex, so we tend to have a little more of a buffer on a project like that. We hope that they don't have to use that, and that's savings for the town. But just in case, that's in the budget for purposes just for dollar amounts right now.
Okay. So we are going to form a building committee for these two projects. My vision is that we would have one committee for both, since it's all being done by one company, and the Board of Selectmen will take that up pretty quickly. But your sense, Dan, as well as from the commission and the Parks and Rec professionals, with both these projects running concurrently, you still feel like you could manage both of these efforts?
Yeah, absolutely. And
Okay.
we're looking to do that, so that we don't impact the summer season.
So that's worth commenting on. Tell me about that sort of plan, start and finish.
So what we're planning to do is start right at the beginning of November. We're doing that so that we can also let the boat club pull the boats out and be done for the season. So they get this full season in. We'll start right after that. And we anticipate to have Pear Tree done at the beginning of May and Weed Beach by May 22nd. So we'll be in good shape to start summer 2026.
Okay. A quick assessment of the discussion so far on these two investments. I think there's broad and pretty easy unanimous support for Pear Tree Point at $9 million. Everybody recognizes the flooding risk, and it's for all to see. And I think that one is the less controversial of the two. Weed Beach has been a bit more controversial for the issues we discussed, mainly around the walkways, which again, we think are important for the reasons discussed. Some have questioned whether we should spend the money. I would just point out that for $2.1 million to finally finish a piece of property and the development of that property after 10 years, just to put that in context, when you consider the $100 million for Inley Homes Royal, the nearly $60 million for the new Oxford School, and then the $85 million for Great Island, that totals about $250 million. And yes, that's an historically large amount of debt for the town of Darien. Weed Beach is less than 1% of that. And I think having something like that, where it's a highly visible project and one that could benefit not just a subset of residents, but all of them, is something important to consider. And certainly my judgment, I think the judgment of my colleagues that have voted in favor of this to date, is that that's a smart investment for us to make and to go ahead and make now. So that's, I think, where we stand in terms of the appropriation. Again, the Board of Selectmen voted on this and approved it unanimously, both of them, this past Monday, September 8th. Board of Finance is meeting on September 16th, and we'll take up these appropriation requests. And in the parallel, we're going to be having some committee meetings with the RTM, with a vote by the RTM on these appropriation requests later this month on September 29th. So that's where we are on this. So before we wrap up, does anyone else have any quick comments, or is there anything we've left out? Or Jen?
No, I'd like to thank you for your support of these projects, John, and remind the public as recently as the surveys that were used to develop the Great Island Master Plan and the recent survey that was done in conjunction with the 2026 POCD, our residents continue to tell us that Weed and Pear Tree Point beaches are their favorite places to go in town, that they value them very highly, that they're one of the reasons they're in town. The bubble chart for the POCD had beaches as big as schools, believe it or not, and they rank the size of the font for importance. So these are our residents are telling us these are very important assets to us. We are a coastal community. That's why so many of us value being here and stay here. And I think it's important that we maintain those two properties to appropriate standards for our community.
Jen, any last comments?
I don't think I could say it any better than how Bora just did.
Dan, have we missed anything technical or smart from you?
No, they're great projects and unique settings, and I think that's a great asset of the town, and hopefully the investments will be made.
Okay. All right. Well, we appreciate everyone's attention. If there are any questions that are unanswered, you saw my contact information. I'm easy to find. Track me down. Give me a call. I'd be happy to talk to you. I'm also happy to attend any RTM meeting, any RTM committee meeting, or the meeting of any other board in town to discuss this and answer your questions. And if I don't have answers, the people around me sitting on this call are all smarter than I am. They've got answers, and I will track them down and make sure your questions get the attention they deserve. So thank you for looking through this, and we appreciate your time and look forward to seeing these appropriations approved. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan.